It is the end of June. We have made it to July. That's kind of crazy how fast time goes by. But we see that this week coming up, there is just this air of feeling a bit more emotionally in tune. We notice our emotions in general coming up a little bit easier. And that being because we see a lot of major transits involving planets that are currently transiting water signs. One of the most notable ones being Neptune, currently transiting Pisces and going into retrograde this week. We also see that there will be a new moon in the water sign of Cancer. So I'm excited to dive into all of this with you. Hello friends, it's your girl Alina, back for another one of our weekly horoscope readings. And in this one, we will be talking about the week of July 1st through the 6th. And we'll just discuss all things that are going on right now. I would love to hear in the comment section how you were feeling last week with all the transits going on. And also, if you've already been noticing any of the pre-shadow period themes of Neptune going retrograde, which will happen later this week. I'd love to hear about it. Also, anything involving Saturn retrograde, which has already begun. I'd love to hear about it. But before we dive in, I want to mention that at the time that you're watching this video, we will have just wrapped up the first annual Aura-Line retreat in Thailand. I know I've been mentioning all the time, but it's pretty exciting. This was the first annual retreat. I'm sure you guys already know that tickets are already on sale for the second annual retreat happening in a year from now. So giving everybody ample time for if you want to do payment plans, planning things out, scheduling things. And same for me, you know, like figuring stuff out it just so far in advance, I feel like is way more efficient compared to the first year. We only had like a few months, but we were still able to do it. But all that to say, if you kind of want a window into what the first annual retreat was like and sort of like a window into what you can expect for Costa Rica, then be sure to follow me on Instagram because I've been posting a bunch of snippets and moments from the trip. And you can probably find it in my saved story highlights and probably a few posts. But if you're interested to learn more, then be sure to click the link in the video description. All right, let's start. So on July 1st, on Monday, we know that Monday is ruled by the moon. So whatever the state of the moon is in, we will feel it more acutely on this day. But it also makes it so if we take aligned steps with, for example, the current phase of the moon, it will be very conducive, very energetically supported. And on Monday, we see that the moon is in the sign of Taurus, this earth sign that really rules over the second house. So we can think about those themes and what is conducive to this day. So for example, it can be very energetically aligned to reflect on ways that you can build or maintain pre-existing structures and routines in your life, and also sort of secure and pour into your financial wellness or your financial health or balance that's in your life. So if that's something you've been meaning to do, Monday could be a great day for that. But we also see that the moon will not only be conjuncting with Mars and Taurus, but it'll also be sextiling with Saturn. Both of these transits make it so Monday will not only feel like a lot more energizing because Mars, the planet of energy, aggression, and taking initiative, will be coming together and really imbuing that energy into our inner world, our emotions, and our psyche, bringing in this inner drive within us. But because there's this complementary sextile with Saturn, which is the planet of responsibility, maturity, and evolution, we can feel a stronger sense of duty and really be able to more easily tap into our why behind what it is that we're doing or working on or have to get done on Monday. And so Monday can feel very energizing for many of us. On the flip side, there could be a potential that our thinking might feel a little bit more impatient and a little bit more, how do I say, almost like judgy, either judging ourselves, being a little bit overly critical of ourselves or others because they're not going at the pace we want. So it's really about tapping into this energy in a constructive way and getting things done. And if somebody's maybe not matching our energy and we're feeling a little impatient, like tapping into some patience or potentially working on doing things on your own or with people who are kind of matching your vibe if you're feeling that way. But understand, as with all lunar transits, because the moon is moving so quickly, this one will be a relatively fleeting situation, though it can be indicative or kind of highlight something that will last longer. Next up, on Tuesday, we see that the moon will be entering the sign of Gemini, making for the next few days being very conducive for socializing, communicating, chit-chatting, catching up with people, and really just sort of information exchange, doing research if you need to, and even planning more short-term travel. Those are some of the many realms that Gemini influences in our lives in a lot of ways. So seeing that the moon will be in that sign will make it so our thinking processes, our emotions, and even our intuition can more easily tap into those realms. But with that said, we see that on Tuesday, Neptune will be going retrograde in the sign of Pisces. So we know that Neptune really influences our imagination, our intuition, and all things that of other realms outside of this. And the influence that our imagination, our intentions, and namely us being idealistic, how we idealize things, how they play a role in manifesting things. And also our imagination in terms of things like escapism. Think of all the ways that our imagination can be used, right? So it can be used as escapism. It can help us to imagine a better future, something different in our lives. On the flip side, it can also be something that plays a role in us overthinking things or creating kind of stories in our mind that aren't real to the point that we're stressed out about something that's not there. And so that's, different sides of the coin of Neptune, generally speaking, on the aspects of our life that it influences, right? And so when we see that Neptune goes retrograde, it tends to bring about these themes of us sometimes pretty rapidly being met with the reality of things and how disconnected the reality is from the way that we had idealized it or expected it to be in our mind, or the way that we had imagined it to play out. Another way that this retrograde can show up is us using escapism and being avoidant of the reality of things because, for whatever reason, we don't want to deal with it. And there being situations that completely pull you out of that escapism of like constantly watching the movies, constantly being on your phone, constantly reading the books. All those things are great and dandy, right? But if they're used to kind of like take our mind to another world, to the point that we're not dealing with things that are important, when Neptune is in retrograde, that might be an important lesson that we need to learn. And it might be through there being hiccups, mishaps, or slowdowns in our normal sort of processes that involve our imagination and our intuition, our spiritual side, and the way that we utilize that, right? So it's like a tool that can be used in the right way, but sometimes if it's not used correctly, we might have these lessons that the universe is trying to tell us through these retrograde mishaps. And I say that because, as with all retrogrades, any sort of issues that come about from a retrograde, they're usually tied to cosmic lessons that we are called to learn in this life, right? And they're done through there being these issues or stagnation with how Neptune normally assists or influences us. And so during this time, one, you don't necessarily need to be afraid or fearful because it's all about how you choose to move in this life, right? It's all about how you choose to handle things. And if some of the things that I said are things that you identify with of like, there is this thing that I've been doing or whatever, then that could show up for you. But if you feel like you have kept your feet on the ground in certain practical senses. For example, say you have this intention or this goal and you idealize it and you're like, oh, it's going to play out this way and it's going to play out that way. You still have your feet on the ground and you're ready to kind of walk down whatever path is in front of you to get there. So it's not like, I don't know what's going to happen and maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't. But then also you don't do anything about it or you don't seek any information or help or you don't take any step to get there. That's an example of having your head in the clouds and being overly idealized to the point that you don't do anything necessarily. Maybe a healthier way of utilizing that sort of Neptune energy is like idealizing it, understanding like, oh, I can get whatever I want, I can manifest whatever I want, but then being open to pivoting, being open to adjusting, being open to whatever path presents itself. Like once I learn how to do it or whatever, I'm ready to adjust and figure it out to get there because I know that no matter what, I'm going to get there, right? Like no matter what, I do have that belief. My imagination is playing that role, but I also am open to whatever path shows up to. Does that make sense? Those are examples of different ways to utilize these sort of idealized and dreamy approaches with Neptune. And so all of that to say, from now, July 2nd until December 7th, I believe it is, Neptune will be in retrograde. Again, it's a slower moving planet, so it's going to take a bit longer. It's not highly likely that you're going to have an indisputable, noticeable retrograde hiccup on Tuesday, but it is important to note that certain things are being set in motion at this point, that sometimes things that have been done or haven't been done at this time or even in the pre-shadow period leading up to this retrograde, there's a high chance that it might come back and play a role in some way later on in the summer or fall. Say if we're not bringing intentionality into when we're getting clear on what we want out of life or idealizing something or idealizing a person or idealizing how we want things to play out, we might need to deal with some hard realities of the reality of things or the disconnect between what we thought would play out and what actually plays out. And overall, I think that a big lesson to remember around this time is the power of practicality, and that two things can exist at the same time. It can be possible that you believe that anything can be possible in your life, while also understanding the role that you consciously need to play as a being on this planet in contributing to that manifesting, right? It's about the energy you put out. That's an action. It's about, the actions that you take in some ways, and maybe not worrying about the how, but being okay with how things play out and being open to it and adaptable. That's a huge thing of being adaptable, especially when things maybe don't play out the way that we thought they would. Being open to being like, oh, okay, I mean, that sucks. I want it to be a certain way, but how can I pivot? Being open to that can be a very potent sort of approach that can help to get us through this retrograde period. Next up, on Tuesday, we see that Mercury, which is currently in Cancer, will be trining with Neptune, which is now retrograde, currently in Pisces. So when we see this type of transit, it can make it so our emotions overflow in a lot of different ways. This can be a feeling of being sentimental, or feeling gratitude, or, also maybe feeling grief, feeling frustration, feeling any spectrum of the emotion. And the reason why I say that is that it can be harder emotions, but in an equal amount, there's a potential for it to be the other way around. Because we do see that Neptune is retrograde, there's a potential that this can be tied to a retrograde sort of mishap, but that's not fully guaranteed. The other thing about retrogrades in general is that there can be this feeling of stagnation or something kind of arrives late that is involved in the transits that the retrograde planet is involved in. So there can be this easy flowing emotional sense from this type of transit with Mercury in this loving and nurturing, softer water sign of Cancer. So our thinking processes are already in this realm of those things, which has to do with like love and the comfort that we give and receive to others and to ourselves. But when it comes together with Neptune, this planet that is about our imagination and dreamy, idealizing things and imagining things and really leaning into that as a tool to create that into your reality, right? And so when it comes together, they can support each other in that way. It'll be relatively fleeting because Mercury will be going into Leo following that transit. So once Mercury is in Leo, it'll be imbuing onto us this increase in our thinking processes where we're thinking more about how can I make sure my voice is heard? How can I make sure that I am seen? And how can I make sure to advocate not only for myself, but for others? There can often be this association with Leos in that it's always egoic. On one side of the coin, for some people, it can be more egoic, but on the other side of the coin, and I would argue 80% of it, if not more, of these characteristics of Leo, it has more so to do with, it comes a bit easier to Leos to take up space. It's a little bit easier for them, and that can actually be utilized to be an ally and to advocate for others, including themselves. When you're in a collaborative space, especially if you're the type of person that you have a bunch of great ideas, but you don't want to be seen, it can actually be very beneficial to partner up with a Leo because they can speak that truth for you while you lean into your genius zone, the gifts that you have that are separate from that. But all of that to say, going back to my point, with Mercury entering the sign of Leo, over the next few weeks, it'll feel a lot easier for us to connect our thoughts with our words and make sure that we really speak them and get them out. It can be very helpful, especially to prevent us holding things in. And finally, on Tuesday, we had a lot of transits on Tuesday. Venus in Cancer will be trining with Saturn in Pisces. So when we see that, it can be a great day to just sort of make things official in kind of like in a more structured way, kind of take relationships to the next level. So if you're dating and you're kind of ready for something like that, and it just feels a bit easier to tap into our sense of responsibility and what it is that we want to do on a more mature level with our relationship. So for example, the question like, where is this relationship going? Like, what are we doing here? And that can be in a romantic sense, but even with friendships, it's like, do I want to make this person more of a serious friend? Or maybe it's a pre-existing relationship and there's just this sense of responsibility of like, okay, like I really do need to kind of work on myself and mature, that being that Saturn energy, in order to bring a bit more balance into this relationship, that being that Venus energy. So things like that can come to the forefront of our awareness around this time. We might have some conversations that deal with something like that, where there's either conversations or situations that provoke conversations within us around that of like, oh, that makes some sense that I should work on this, or I'm excited for us to take this next step. Next up, on Wednesday, July 3rd, we see that Wednesday is ruled by Mercury. So it makes it so this day can be pretty great for collaborating, for reaching out to people, getting some information, and not being afraid to lean on one another, especially when it comes to getting any sort of resources that we might be looking for, we might need help with. And by the way, anything that's going on with Mercury, we most strongly feel. So on Wednesday, we see that Mercury in Leo will actually be opposing Pluto, which is currently in Aquarius. So when we see this type of transit, it can imbue a sense of stubbornness. It can increase the likelihood that we experience a situation where it's either ourselves, other people around us we're noticing, or both people involved, just feeling a lot more stubborn, a lot more stuck in our ways in a lot of ways. And there just being a high possibility of power struggles. It just kind of bothering us mentally and getting kind of in our heads a bit. There's a higher likelihood of that. And I say that because, Pluto is the planet of the shadow. It's a planet of the necessary degradation of what's not working, and often things that we need to push down in order to grow and change in some way. But there does need to be some sort of like a change in some way. That's what Pluto rules over, like the changes that are tied to the more shadow aspects of our lives that need to be sort of grappled with. And so when we have this more challenging opposition between Pluto and Mercury, which rules over our thinking and our information exchange, it increases likelihood that there might be conversations where it just feels like one or the other or both of y'all are not getting through. And there's a stubbornness that's rooted in something likely egoic or something where they don't want to be wrong or you don't want to be wrong, but it might present some difficult situations. There's a chance of that. But next up on Thursday, we know Thursday is ruled by Jupiter, so making it a relatively benefic day. It's a really great day for pursuing things that kind of expand your understandings, expand your awareness. So that can be more of spiritual pursuits, philosophical pursuits, education as well. And we see that on this day that the moon moves out of Gemini and goes into the sign of Cancer, this very loving, gentle sign. But really, the moon is at its strongest really when it's in Cancer, because that is its ruling astral body of Cancer. So this can make this day and the next few days pretty favorable for really nurturing any sort of like home-related activities, anything having to do with your more immediate home, family. Think about your personal sanctuary. Like, where do you go where you don't feel judged, where you can just exist, where you feel safe? That's usually our homes. When the moon is in the sign of Cancer, it can be very energetically supported to pour into those areas of our life. So to pour into our home and our immediate family, and really pour into also ourselves and our emotions. It's very much like a self-care sort of sign to be in. Also on Thursday, we see that the moon in Cancer will be squaring with Neptune in Pisces. And on top of that, Neptune is close to being retrograde, so this is the pre-shadow period, I believe. But when we see that this happens, it can increase the likelihood of feeling a bit confused, feeling a bit disillusioned, and feeling like there's just something off from the way that we thought it would be. And it's because we see that the moon is in a squared aspect with Neptune, which is a pretty difficult aspect to have with this planet of the imagination and of the ideals and the spiritual realm. So there's a chance that, that there could be some confusion there. But overall, there's a high chance that you might feel a bit confused and that your judgment might not be the best, or you might be trying to work with someone or communicate with someone who it seems apparent that their judgment isn't the best, and there's this effort to try and figure it out. Next up, we have Friday, July 5th. We know that Friday is ruled by Venus, so whatever state that Venus is in will be more acutely felt, but also it makes it so Friday can be a lot easier to tap into romance and into passions and into activities or experiences that pour into your relationships of the heart. But we also see on Friday that Mars in Taurus will be sextiling with Saturn in Pisces. Now this sextile, y'all, it is like taking an espresso shot. Basically, if you decide to set some intentions on this day, not just because there's also a new moon, but because of this transit, it'll imbue a lot of support when it comes to having a lot of stamina and focused energy and clear alignment in your actions with what you are calling yourself to do, or you are being called from the world and the universe to kind of grow into. And it just can really help you to start anything like a new career. It could be even like sort of like putting some ideas out there. But ultimately, if you decide to start something on this day, there's a high chance that it will be lasting because of that. But let's look at more context to the day. We also see that there will be a new moon in the sign of Cancer. So as many of you guys already know, new moons mark the beginning of a new lunar cycle. It's this cosmic reminder that it is okay to rest and reflect before being in action. The new moon isn't necessarily about starting a brand new thing on that day. It's more so about reflecting on what has and hasn't worked for you, especially in the previous lunar cycle, so over the last 28 days. And if you need to readjusting things or planning things out that are new, and then as time goes on, then eventually starting it once you have kind of like all your ducks in a row and you're very clear on the direction you want to go in, right? And just as we see that the light builds on the surface of the moon, between now and the full moon, so too can the momentum around any intentions that you set around this time also build. And considering that Mars will be sextiling with Saturn in this way at this time, this can make for a really fertile soil for intention setting and getting really clear on the direction you want to go and really any aspect of your life. But namely, if you want to get even more specific, you could look at what house this new moon in Cancer will be transiting, because there will be a lot of energetic support within that space. And by the way, I'm sure you guys already know, but if you haven't already thought about it, be sure to check out my video covering this Cancer new moon, because that video goes even deeper into it, and you can check that out on my channel. And also, if you guys didn't already know, I actually send out regular astrology newsletters for every new and full moon. So if you want a deep dive into any given lunation, email directly to you with journal prompts and links to the video as well, then be sure to sign up for my newsletter, which will be linked in the video description. Keeping up with those vibes of having this higher energy and feeling capable to kind of like handle, maybe these are new plans, new intentions that you have, or things that are in front of you. We see that on Saturday, July 6th, which is ruled by Saturn. Saturday is ruled by Saturn. In general, to set the stage, it's already a really potent day for taking responsibility for things, being in action in alignment with things that we've made promises on, and really looking into the evolution of our soul and our growth in different ways. That can be very conducive on this day, really taking care of our responsibilities. But on this day, we see that the moon will be entering the sign of Leo, making it so it can feel a lot easier to express what's going on in our inner world and really make sure that our voice is being heard in a lot of ways. But next up, we see that the moon in Leo will actually be trining with Saturn in Pisces. So you see what I mean, that it'll be keeping up with these more Saturn themes of taking responsibility and feeling capable and ready to kind of step up to the plate, especially if you did set some new moon intentions. But even if you didn't, it just imbues this sense of feeling a lot more capable to take steps forward. There's also a potential that people might come to you for advice when it comes to their own growth on this day, but ultimately there will be these themes that you notice either within yourself or around you of just being a bit more practical, of not being afraid to pause and ask for help, to pause and ask somebody who's a little bit more wise or who has come before you for advice. And finally, on July 7th, 7-7, I love to see those numbers line up. We see that Sunday is ruled by the sun, so it can be an opportune day for things that have to do with revitalizing yourself. That way you can really shine bright the rest of the week in a lot of ways, but really pouring into yourself. But it can also be a great day for taking up leadership roles. So maybe somebody's coordinating, say, a cookout or an event or something like that, and they need help. Tapping into that, leaning into that can be very helpful and energetically supported on this day. But we see that on Sunday, the moon will be conjuncting with Mercury, with them both in the sign of Leo. So we have the astral body that influences our emotional world, how we process things, and our intuition, coming together with Mercury, the planet that involves our thinking processes, our information, our more intellectual side, learning things, asking for help and receiving it, in the sign of Leo. And what this can do is it can make us feel very chatty, very conversational in a lot of ways, and also very confident to express and say how we're feeling and tell our stories and not be too afraid of judgment. There's a higher likelihood that you kind of notice those themes on this day. It can also be a day that if you want to sort of meet up with friends and sort of like strengthen a relationship, kind of catch up or open up to maybe somebody who's new in your life, this transit can make it so Sunday can be an opportune day for fortifying relationships and even deepening them, because we naturally will feel more open to talking and expressing. But that wraps up my video for the week of July 1st through the 7th. If you made it through to the end of this video, I would love if you commented 3 butterfly emojis to let me know that you made it. And yeah, be sure to check out videos and moments from the retreat that we hosted in Thailand over the last week on my Instagram page, which will be linked in the description. And also learn about the Costa Rica retreat, which we have a year to plan, a year to budget for, a year to do everything for. I'm just so excited to have something farther out in advance to allow us all, anybody who's really interested, we can make it happen because it's a lot more practical versus, you know, kind of rushing to do it. So I'm just really excited about that. And this is a pre-recorded video because I went on the retreat, but I just know that I had a great experience. I just wish that I could be saying this afterwards. I just know that I had a great time, but I'm preemptively really grateful for the experience. Like, at the time of me recording this, I will be leaving for the retreat like next week. Am I like, you know, destroying an illusion of like this being more current? I don't know. But yeah, my perception of time is also warped because I'm pre-recording stuff. Oh my gosh. But anyway, I hope that you guys have a beautiful week ahead. I'm sending you love. I'm sending you good juju. And I'm sending you that mental clarity and sense of self and feeling of being capable. I'm just wishing that upon you for this week. And I'll see you in the next one. And I'll wrap this up with my favorite quote. And that is, be gentle with yourself. Because life is about the journey and not the destination. All right, I'll see you in the next one.